Hey everybody, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Paradyme. In this week's episode, we talk about Chapter 3 from the book The Catalyst by author Jonah Berger. The title of this chapter is Distance. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the video, leave us a comment below. We love hearing from you guys, and make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms. All the information will be in the description below. We hope you enjoy the show.
Search for a new set of rules.
Bread is of little use to the man who has betrayed his soul.
Maybe you're the protagonist in your story, but like there's a million other people.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, to Paradyme. This is Chapter 3 of the book The Catalyst, How to Change Anyone's Mind by Jonah Berger. Chapter 3 is titled Distance. So I want to know what you guys thought of this chapter.
Reading the subheading, I did not know what to expect because I was like, how are they going to, furthering reading, you know what I mean? It kind of clicked, but I think this chapter really pinpointed being able to take your ideas and the way you see the world and also not just tap into other people's shoes, not just hear from where, but also be able to, he talks about it, we'll talk about it, but being that ability to place yourself in someone else's shoes is not as easy as you think.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So that was a kind of like the main keynote that I took away from this chapter.
For me, the keynote that I found that was the most valuable was the phrase moving the middle.
Yeah.
And the rejection zones. And I realized it reminded me of the book Nice Bike, making the connection. And once you can make a connection with somebody, if you can move their middle, they're more likely to go along with something maybe that was out of their zone originally. So if you're having to deal with somebody, maybe find a middle ground and then branch off from there.
Yeah, definitely.
That was a good one.
How about you, Jay?
So the more I read this book, the more it relates back to this class I took at Reedley Community College. It was Com 4, and it was all about persuasion. And it brought up this spectrum of beliefs, right, on any subject. And it talked about the zone of rejection, or the zone of acceptance and the region of rejection. Yeah. It talked about that on a spectrum. And it talked about the same thing, locating the middle, kind of getting a common ground, and then enforce would be kind of a tough word, but trying to enforce or inspire change in somebody without going like, okay, if you're on the far end, like if it's a loading bar and I'm on 0 and you're on 100, not shoot for 1. You know what I mean? Shoot for like 75 just to get minimal movement, and then just kind of chunk it out from there. Yeah. You know? So it was really interesting. It keeps bringing me back to the classes I've taken.
I like how he used the football field as an analogy in that same retrospect.
Right, right.
That kind of tied it in for me. Like, I was like, just to see something visually, it made a lot of sense.
For me, too.
Huh. How about you, David?
Yeah, another great chapter. I really love the idea that we can, it'll get talked about further on, but the idea of an unsticking point really was something that I like, finding out where people agree versus where they disagree in order to get the change that you're looking for.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting in this chapter, too, he talks about Prop 8. Does anyone remember that?
Yeah.
In middle school, I remember it being the biggest thing.
I remember that exactly, too.
Division and, like, the conversations the middle schoolers, we would have on, like, out on the blacktop. Yeah. It's like, just love is love, dude. And it's like, back then, I didn't think like that. I grew up in a really Christian home, and it was like, nah, bro, like, you don't get it. You know what I'm saying?
That was for California.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I was like, what are you guys talking about, Prop 8? Refer back to it. Now I remember now.
Right. And then now it's like, it makes a ton of sense because it's like they break it down. Common ground is like, you want to be able to love. I want to be able to love. Like, shouldn't that be allowed? And it was like, as soon as I got that, it kind of clicked and it made sense to me.
Yeah.
You know? Right. And so, I thought it was really interesting. You guys want to dive into it?
Sure.
Hell yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir.
So I just highlighted the second word was when Virginia knocked, and I said, get the jokes out of the way.
Virginia's a knocking.
Virginia,
how could you? No, but on the next page, I highlighted where he goes into dialogue with Gustavo and the canvasser. I forget the name of the canvasser.
Sure, her name is Virginia.
Mm-hmm. Oh, Virginia. Mm-hmm. So they're talking. It says, where does that come from, that feeling? Asking about why Gustavo doesn't agree with transgender sexuality. Mm-hmm. He says, because I'm from South America, and in South America we don't like
You can say
Fags.
F words.
Fags.
We're quoting the
F-words.
book, right?
Fags, yeah. So we're quoting the book, but he says we don't like fags. And then I have an arrow down to the bottom. It says, there's these things called so-called filter bubbles are a common explanation for the discord. Birds of a feather have always flocked together, and people have always preferred media outlets that support their existing views. So I linked those together because he mentioned South America. He doesn't say, I grew up learning this from my mom and this is my teachings. He throws a whole community in there and not just his own ideas and how he was taught. So I took that quote and kind of put it, and I think a lot of society moves this way. Once you see a certain amount of people going against something, or it's against the grain that you may have like a counter argument to, you kind of just roll with that because you don't want to be looked at as someone that's an outcast.
Yeah.
So you kind of just roll with the flow.
Right.
So I think that a lot of people fall on that, but I thought it was really interesting how he kind of like, because I'm from South America, and from South America, we don't agree with that.
Right.
So it was interesting to me.
Going off with what you just said, isn't that why Twitter is so successful? Is because you can pick certain groups and followings that you can follow, and then that just mirrors more of what you like to hear.
Yeah.
You know?
Yep.
All my news is stuff that I'm interested in. Very rarely does someone pop up and it makes me upset because it's my Twitter. It's my
And, and he follows that. He follows that with the next paragraph where he talks about intellectual isolation.
Isolation?
Yeah, isolation, but how do you say the word isolate?
Isolationism.
Isolationism. And it's like we created the web, or the web was created, social media was developed, and overall you got Twitter, Instagram, and it shows you things that you agree with. It's not going to show you stuff that's going to go against your views.
I don't know if you guys ever saw that TED Talk about the guy that broke down Facebook, that like it only shows you based on the algorithm stuff that you like, right? And so like it creates this echo chamber of just things that you believe or you like.
Same thing with your Instagram search feed.
Right.
It's built around.
And then he says here, technology has exasperated these tendencies.
Yeah.
And so it's 100% true. Like it makes me think of like, I don't know, if you're extremely liberal and you go on to Facebook or Twitter or whatever, and you've liked things and you've swiped right or whatever.
That can almost be harmful though, because like you said the word echo chamber. There's no new ideas. It's just echoing of the same stuff, and you almost get doubled down. You go, my beliefs are right because everyone else around me is saying the same thing.
Right.
It doesn't show conflicting viewpoints.
Yeah.
Right.
It's exploiting people's inner demons or whatever that they like. It's what's the word? Like galvanizing them or
Gaslight.
gaslight? No. Fuck.
It hardens them in their ideas.
Yeah, that's what
It's
galvanizing.
galvanizing.
Yeah. And so if you're, say, a conservative, or maybe you're seeing some, let's say, for lack of better words, like racist shit or whatever on Facebook, you will see more of that if you're liking stuff like that. If your conversations, comments with family, friends, whatever.
Yeah, even if it's like,
that.
if you engage into it where you're disagreeing with somebody, it will still, that stuff will, because the engagement, they don't care what you're engaging with or how you're engaging with it, it's going to show up more because that's what you're active on.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it creates just bodies of monolithic cultures, right? Like when you hear about people talking about politics, it's like the black vote, the brown vote, the Latino vote, or Latinx, as they would say nowadays, which doesn't make any sense. But they're trying to, it almost creates these monoliths where it's like, like the guy said, I'm from South America. Typically, like Cuba, places like that tend to be more conservative because they've seen the other side of what it looks like. We've seen it, we've lived it, we don't want to do it anymore. And so, like, he identifies with this monolith, right? Like, oh, if South America doesn't agree with it, then I don't agree with it. Or like black culture, hey, they voted at a 90% plus clip of Democrats for a long time, right? And they identify with being black, and so I vote as a monolithic culture with my culture, right? And so it's not like thinking of the ideas and do I really believe with the belief behind this, the real meaning behind this. It's more of like, oh, my people did this, then I got to do that. So it's interesting to even see that in the echo chamber, if we use that word of like social media or the people you hang out with. You identify with something and you just vote based on those lines.
Yeah, it's scary once you get into it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's really interesting how on point with some of the subjects that this chapter was. Like Prop 8, that was something I grew up with hearing about.
That's funny that you guys actually were a part of that.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like the trans stuff now, like you know, I'm not, there's things that I'm kind of like, whoa, about the whole thing, because it's like something I don't know.
Yeah,
right?
there's a lot of gray areas still.
But when she was like, hey, I think I should have the right to love somebody too, or I don't know what the pronouns are, but
I would say most Americans would align with that phrase, that sentence you just said. You should be able to love whoever you want to love.
right. And so hearing that, it was interesting, because I agree, everybody should have the right to be. I have something on page 94.
Perfect.
I thought that was really interesting, that says, rather than changing false beliefs, exposure to the truth often increased misconceptions. Giving people correct information made them more likely to believe the exact opposite. Can you guys think of a time in your life where that occurred?
Okay, give me a second just to think about a particular topic. But just on that note,
Right.
many times I've seen it happen. That when I come to an argument, not even an argument, because argument sounds like it's not a debate anymore.
Yeah, it's like conflict.
Yeah, it's not a conflict. We're
Right.
just talking about our opposing sides. The second someone starts bringing in more facts, I can physically see the other person shut down and be like, no,
Right.
doubling down on my original answer.
Right.
For no reason.
Right.
I think it has more. I think it has more to do with psychology than it does with the facts that you're providing. A lot. What we just learned, people don't want to give up their the reactants. Their
Status quo.
they don't want. Yeah, they don't want to lose their control of their own freedom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so when someone's coming at you with straight hard facts and they're trying to prove that they're right, even if they're not,
Right.
they're still going to get, this is my truth, this is my life, that you're not going
Right,
to, I'm
right.
going to double down on what I believe just because you're coming at me with these hard facts. So I think it's deep. I think it's psychology more than facts and what you can bring to the table.
I'd agree.
It sort of reminds me of that chapter in the 12 Rules for Life. Assume that the other person you're talking to knows something that you don't.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the key things that I took away from that book, one of the concepts was, it's really hard for people to listen or actively listen because they're afraid of stepping down or stooping down to the level that they think the opposite person is on, who's trying to prove them a point or make that point. So I think it's egotistic. It's egotistical, and ego's involved somewhere in there.
Yeah, probably.
Sure.
Not willing to listen because that involves you saying, all right, yeah,
I
you're
might have
kind of
been
right.
right. Yeah, I might have been
all right.
wrong.
Finding that area where you agree.
Right. I think also in 12 Rules for Life by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson was number 1, right? Stand up straight with your shoulders back. I think it was in an interview or something like that where I was watching it in the gym about Rule 1. And it was like, when you correct some lecturer in class, he's not going to get mad at you because you were right. He's going to get mad at you because now you've questioned his status on the hierarchy of dominance, right? So it's like, if I come to you and I could bring you cold, hard facts, I've established myself as, like, let's say a number 1 lobster, right? If you're right, that means I'm not a number 1 lobster. That means I was incompetent. So I have to drop myself to learn something to now become a number 1 lobster.
But the argument becomes, if you're at the number 1 status and it takes that little to break your number 1 status, then are
Yeah.
you deserving of number 1?
Is artificial.
True.
It's not. So I think if that number 1, if let's just speak in the forms of lobsters, like that number 1 lobster was number 1 for 10 years, and it takes one student lobster to question that,
A little
Right.
baby lobster.
like that, going crazy.
Shrimp.
I think that in that Enneagram test that we all took, it breaks down whatever number you are. It's unhealthy, mental,
Yeah.
mindset, middle, and then healthy. And I could read through my own characteristic, and I would like to think that right now I'm in the healthy category, the way I act. But I can see in the past, maybe if I was in the middle or even borderline on the middle to the unhealthy side, those characteristics, I could also see me in the past. And one of them would be accepting, being able to say, oh, you were right. Is one of them, pretty much. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's a healthy mindset. If you're not a healthy mindset, it's way harder to accept that you're wrong. You know? I was just thinking to myself, there's been multiple times where I see David all the time just because we go to the gym and stuff. And
Yeah.
I'll be talking and something happened. I was like, my bad. I was wrong. You're right. You know, but like a lot of people, they don't, just to say that one sentence is like
It's
a stab in the heart.
Yeah,
but
it's a shot at their pride.
it's just like, I don't know, dude. I see David talking. I was like, my bad, dude. I was wrong. You're right.
Yeah, it
It's
really-
very quick like that. Who cares?
It really feels good to, like, to me, to minimize myself, to like really just kick in the humbleness and to really, like, that feels good to me. Like, that someone else is teaching me something that like, damn, I was going by the wrong map for so long and this person just changed it. Like,
It's because you're in a healthier mindset. I was
Yeah.
getting at is I feel comfortable with what we have and where I stand in life. So if I'm wrong, not the end of the world, you know. I'm
Right.
happy that you were able to correct me. So
Yeah.
from now on, I'm not
gonna
wrong.
move. Yeah. So yeah, that's a good way.
That's
of
been a
looking
big
at
one for me, is being able to take criticism and admit you're wrong. For me, I'll say that.
it. Yeah. that's-
I'm man enough to say that's my bad.
yeah, dude. You know.
Land of the Lost joke right there. But,
On page 95, I do have a question. Not toward like a question for you guys, but I question what he put. He's speaking on the football field and the field of beliefs.
Okay.
The end paragraph on page 95, he says, applied to changing minds, staking out farther positions takes advantage of the tendencies to split the difference. Even if people don't move all the way, meeting in the middle means ending up closer to the desired endpoint. When he uses the term meeting in the middle and finding an endpoint, I question that because we learned in, was it 12 rules of life or 7 habits, where he talks about where they talk about compromise, and usually compromise is not the best situation to land in because it's a lose-lose. And he's saying meeting in the middle will get to a desired endpoint. Is it a desired endpoint or is it just an endpoint?
Okay, I see what you're saying.
You see what I'm saying? And the only reason why I know about that is because we read those previous books, and he talks about compromise as being a lose-lose situation because you're losing something, and then the other person is losing something. You're not fully getting to the win-win, where there is a possibility of win-win, but
I think this is maybe a different scenario because the main goal is to get someone to change their minds, where maybe in that book, it's more so of, what was it? Instead of compromise, it's
Collaborate.
collaborate.
yeah.
To do a win-win, but I don't think that involves really changing someone's mind. It's more of like how let's work together.
It's like formulating an idea together.
I would say we're going with even the meet in the middle point, whether it is compromise or collaboration, the meet in the middle would still be beneficial because if there's nowhere for me to stand with you, there's nowhere for me to start collaborating with you. I get that this guy, his whole thing, he's trying to change someone's mind or whatever, you know,
Yeah, in that specific situation.
in that specific situation. But even if your end goal was to collaborate, if the person's just like, hey, I can't do this at all, and then you find somewhere in the middle, it's like, okay, what can you do now that we've kind of met somewhere, you know?
That makes sense because this is more of like a conversation middle, like
Yeah.
where he talks about the conversation at the door, Gustavo and Virginia. So that makes a lot more sense. It's not a compromise. It's Virginia trying to get Gustavo to understand where she's coming from, and also where he's coming from and why he believes that way. So
Yeah.
it's not really a compromise. They're not losing anything.
I just wanted to say too, compromise isn't really a lose-lose. You know, a lose-lose would be avoiding. A lose-lose would be accommodating. A lose-win would be accommodating, and a win-lose would be competing. Compromise is the lowest form of win-win, right? Because you win something and I win something because we both compromised on something we can agree upon.
The critique on the compromise is that if it's in a long relationship, whether it's business related, relationship related, or whatever, is if you're always compromising, both parties still have that lingering feeling of a lose,
Right.
and then it doesn't really solve the longevity of the problems.
Right.
You only put a Band-Aid on them. So if you have long relationships, it'd be the best to collaborate.
Spit.
Right, yeah, because that's the highest form of win-win. I would agree.
If you're always compromising, you're always feeling like you're losing a little bit.
Yeah.
And then you hold that resentment, and it goes into the resentment bank, right? It starts banking up, and then the next time you go to compromise, either you blow up, your partner blows up, whether it's a business or a relationship or whatever.
I think that's kind of going to be the win-win in like these discussions where you're trying to change people's beliefs is like,
Sure.
just like the football field, right? If they're on the 100 and I'm on 0 and I get them to 75, I'm okay with
Yeah,
it.
like there has to be a middle ground
Right.
when it comes to discussing very
Hard, rigid topics.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a really sticky
Right.
situation. So that makes sense. I just question that.
No,
Yeah,
that's a good question.
It is good. That's a good question.
Because I think the same way since the 7 Habits, it's been ringing in my head about compromise is bad. I try, even we compromise all the time, but I always think to myself, well, can we collaborate? You know?
Yeah, is there a better
That's
situation?
you're
elsewhere?
aiming for that one over
Yeah.
compromise most of the time.
Definitely.
You guys want to talk about the zone of acceptance and
Yeah.
the region of rejection?
Yeah,
Sure.
so I highlighted them in pink for definitions.
Okay.
Yeah, same.
So the zone of acceptance was the perspective that people agreed with most, along with the range of viewpoints they could see potentially supporting. And then the region of rejection is the range of perspectives people strongly disagreed with or actively rejected as wrong. And he kind of drew it out as a football field. I've been saying, if I'm on the 0 and you're at 100, getting you to 80 is a sufficient movement.
Are you saying getting to 80 all in one movement? Or are you saying getting to 80 like?
He's saying if
Chunks.
the person's at 100 and he can move him to the 80-yard mark,
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
and he's
Okay.
trying to, let's say, get him to 50, he's already on a good
Yeah,
roll.
my mind was reversed. I was thinking 0 to 70.
Oh,
like,
no, that's a
yeah.
big one.
Yeah, I was
That's
like,
a big jump.
I think most people have a bigger region of rejection.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the topic.
For many things.
I would say it's
I
where,
think so.
where you are emotionally. You know, are you confident in yourself? Are you open to new ideas? Are you rigid in your life?
Yeah.
How often do you go outside? Do you enjoy the sunshine? I think
think-
it all plays a part.
Yeah, I think the majority of people they don't consciously lean into rejection just on purpose. I think
Yeah.
we get so comfortable in our ways, our habits, our beliefs, that when you are searching for new ideas, it's usually because you learned something new.
Mm-hmm.
So that's when you're actually searching for something new. But if you're not learning and educating and tapping into your emotional intelligence, then I think we all, majority of us, kind of just live in the 2080.
Yeah.
Like we have a zone for acceptance because we're used to that little area, and then it's like our social medias, right?
Yeah.
Where it shows,
Yeah.
and then that the zone of rejection is not there because we don't want it to be there.
Yeah.
The reason why I bring up the outside thing too is because just recently I've been camping with Jeremy. This weekend we all went for 4th of July. Happy 4th of July, everybody.
Mhm.
And the weekend prior we went to Shut Eye, and I realized a lot of those people, us included, who like to spend time outside, enjoy just kind of the loosey-goosey, enjoy the sunshine, get to be outside. I would say all those guys have a little bit more open-mindedness to everything and learning something, because all those guys have different specialties, and they're not so rigid where if they try to teach to someone, they're like, no, that's not how we do it. You know,
Talking about people in our group.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
people in a group, and there's other people that I went camp with last time. I think people that are more outdoorsy, who spend more time outside, more physical stuff, they're more comfortable with something new because it will value them later in the future.
Yeah, and it's a challenge too. A lot of people avoid going camping and because
Pe-
it's uncomfortable.
People I'm thinking they stay in their room or at home watching Netflix and stuff, they would be less likely to learn something new because they're already in a box themselves.
Ooh.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I can see that.
That's very factual.
Yeah.
Well, I can see. Yeah, that's really interesting.
Because outdoors teaches you a lot, like social. Can you communicate what you need? Right?
Right.
There has to be collaboration if you don't know how to do something.
Yeah. If there's
Especially when
no
it
service.
comes to camping and people want you to do something and you don't know where to look. So
Even
there's
with cooking, like we got the girls
Yeah.
going, we showed them this is how you work the stove, handle it, you know. And
Could be your own paradigm too. That most people who go camping are open-minded and whatnot. Sometimes there's people that camp and they're there to
yeah.
camp, and they're doing the same thing, and that's probably their box, like vice versa.
that's
what
true.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's true. There
They,
is-
they wouldn't dare go to the city because fuck that, right?
that is true.
This guy.
Camping duties.
I think kind of going off of that point on page 99, it says here, people have a range or zone around their beliefs that they are willing to consider. And so, like, kind of going off your question, do you think we always have a bigger region of rejection than a zone of acceptance? I think it depends on the subject, but there is this range around your ideas that you can expand into. So, like everybody deserves to love, right? How far are you willing to expand that? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Who can love who and what?
I have certain guidelines that I would think would be, even at the most obscure, pretty rational thinking, you know?
Yeah.
So, along the lines of,
Yeah.
you got to be 18 and up to love. You know
Yeah,
what I'm saying?
yeah,
There's
yeah.
none of this weird.
I was
Bullshit.
able to change sort of the way that I think about things politically because I heard people like on YouTube get me to think about the things in that area, the zone of acceptance, or that very
Border.
the border.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys read the case studies, but there's someone who switched from a Democrat to Republican,
Mm-hmm.
started entertaining a lot of ideas of Republicans, and it wasn't. He didn't agree with some of the conservative things, but he changed to Republican.
Dishwasher?
No,
Yeah.
it's not.
No, I don't
Go
know.
for it.
Talking about Ronald Reagan?
So,
You're talking about Ronald Reagan?
no.
Okay.
I'm just saying me like the way
Oh.
that I didn't never thought I would entertain, I guess, the Republican or conservative side of the things, but I can see and there is some sort of middle ground where I'm like, oh, you got a point there,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that, you know?
Oh yeah.
I'm not
Definitely.
totally anti, like, it pisses me off when people close to me are saying, like, oh, fuck you if you're a Republican, or it's crazy to
Yeah.
me.
To me,
It's
you're
crazy.
You're
Oh, yeah.
just as bad as the person you don't want to become.
Yeah.
Like
Right.
you're
He
not
talks
making
about
no
that.
progression. Like
Yeah.
Right.
that's why, me personally, I stay away from politics unless you seriously want to have an open conversation
Right.
and not tie emotions into it.
Right.
If you can't
right.
do that, then I
True.
don't even want to talk about it. I just
Yeah.
stay away from it. Because what I find is people that usually lean to the left, you have the same people that lean too far right.
Yeah,
Oh,
And
yeah,
it-
oh, yeah.
I
it
totally agree with that.
plays both sides, and they try and point the finger. And you look at the mainstream media; that's what they're teaching people to do.
Well,
So-
that's the best way to do it.
It's a
for
and
them
it's
to
a
get views and
competition,
stuff,
like you
yeah.
know what I mean. So I see it as a sport. I see it
Yeah.
as like blue versus red.
It's entertainment.
Like
Literally.
Even people in my family, they're more conservative, but I was like, they all day long I talk to them. They talk about politics. They talk about the crazy left. Exactly what you said. For every crazy left, there's a crazy right person.
Exactly.
Who's better? And they're trying to argue the fact that they're better because they're on this side. No, they're crazy.
It's like more. It's more debate based on alliance lines. It's not even like.
Right.
And I thought the
That's what it
best
is.
thing when discussing like politics and stuff like that is get to the root belief, right? So it's like, okay, you're a Democrat. Well, for what issues, right? So really breaking into the issues, right?
True.
Like, okay, if you're pro-choice, then let's talk about that idea.
There's been actually a lot
You
of
know?
blind surveys and stuff where they just ask people, let's say who are left leaning, hey, they say Biden wants this, and this, which are all the Republican points for to win the next election, but they're
Right.
just saying that it's Biden's, and they go, we agree with that 100%, and they go, what if I told you that was
Donnie T's.
Donnie T, and they're like, oh.
No. Yeah.
So it just like you said, they're just so quick to just jump on the boat because they go, that's my captain.
Yeah.
Can you think of one person in your life who you sort of done that for, or like sparked that change, but you reached them on a zone of acceptance, or right on that border where they're
Yes.
entertaining your idea, and they're like, all right, yeah, I guess I kind of see that.
yes,
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, I could even think of myself. You know what I'm saying? Like, literally getting fresh out of high school, like extreme left, right? Like to the farthest left, like.
You were?
Oh yeah, extremely. Like fuck the police, this, all the lefty stuff you could think of, just
Lefty.
all the way that way, right?
You were left-handed at that point.
Yeah, I was left-handed, definitely. But then, like you said, like just going and identifying, there's subjects. It's not like I'm this because these are my people. It's like, well, now I kind of need to identify where I stand on certain issues.
Right.
Yeah.
And then so once I really started diving into like, okay, well, how do I really feel about that? And like we've had discussions like, how do you feel about abortion? I'm still trying to even put my mind around that, right? Like,
Yeah.
where do I stand on that?
Yeah.
So just kind of reanalyzing myself and seeing myself now compared to like, let's say 20 is like completely different in the way I believe in things. It's like,
You're more mature now. You have your own
yeah,
ideas.
I was extremely on the left-hand side because that's what I was told I was supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right. And now that I've kind of dove into those ideas themselves, I've seen myself move a little bit more towards the middle, move maybe into the right a little bit, but then it's still like, I think where the real things get done is right in the middle.
I would say I agree with you on the opposite side. I have seen myself, the older I get, the more my middle shifts to the left.
Mm-hmm.
When I was younger, I was definitely more right and very closed-minded.
Right.
But now I've just gotten older. I know what life, I've been learning about life and seen, around the country or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, who cares about some of the stuff that the right dies on the hill for?
Right.
I think
But-
demographic and location and community, that all plays into it as well.
100%.
Like there's a huge part of that like
Oh, yeah.
as kids we can't compromise. We can't comprehend that. Like we are just kids being around other people, just growing up, and when
Right.
they have ideas, I want to fit in with my friends. I'm gonna believe what they believe.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
If you
man.
grow up in California, you're like 90%. I'm willing to put a bunch of money on it that you're going to be left when you've come out of high school.
Totally.
That's what it is.
I would say I'm pretty middle to the right just because of the economics and stuff.
Right.
I believe,
True.
where
That's
I land
cool.
myself.
Like, I mean, just sit down with people that are across the aisle, like he says here, like reach out across the aisle. It's a lot of people really don't do that and discuss the issues. Like, well, what do you believe in this? Because you'll learn a lot. You really will.
Have
I
you-
think some people just haven't tapped into the ability to control their emotions.
yeah, that's
I think that's
That's
the
the
biggest
big
part.
one.
That's the biggest thing. It's
self-discipline.
if you
Yeah.
can control like wanting to lash out and or scream at somebody and you're wrong or cry or
See, people don't have outlets. I always bring it back to where's your outlet? Like a normal person shouldn't have those emotions.
Yeah.
I shouldn't talk about something like that and get yelled at by a Karen at Starbucks. You know,
Yeah.
My bad.
what are you doing?
there's their counsel or anything.
Can you guys rename an experience, or maybe where you stand right now, where your middle's been moved prior? You brought up politics. Is there someone for you guys where you're like, my
Police.
middle hasn't moved? David 5 years ago was here, but now mentally or emotionally, I've watched my middle move, and I'm more accepting of certain things. And if not, you don't have to bring it up.
It was my
I can identify one in David.
oh yeah, hit me.
Religion.
Religion?
Yeah, you were like extremely opposed to it at one point, I felt. And now that we've kind of been doing these discussions and they have some religious text, like in Dr. Jordan B. Peterson's book, you were kind of more open to having the discussion, and maybe I wrap your brain around a couple ideas.
I remember this because in the very beginning, we were talking about the Bible stuff, and me and you were debating on something. I remember Jay talking to me later being like, hey, maybe you should lay off a little bit because you don't want to scare David away from, like, we had just started the book club.
Right.
And I was like, nah, like we're having a conversation.
No, yeah, I don't think I was like, I guess, opposed to it. I think the main issue of why I had a lot of barriers, I'd say, is just because of what I've seen with my mom, and we've talked about that,
Right.
you know, on a bunch of episodes. But yeah, that book specifically, maybe that could be an inspiration to young men out there who are maybe having a hard time understanding some of the concepts of the Bible. It made me feel like I was closer in my faith and understanding the spiritual aspect and physical aspect of concepts that go into, you know, the first book of the Bible. And Jordan Peterson talks about a lot of that. It's pretty crazy, and Bible stories made a little bit of more sense to me. So he got me on that zone of acceptance, I'd say. So pretty sick. I will say I started out left, though, right out of college. I've been left long time.
Used to joke
And
about
I'm moving towards the right, just a little bit. I'm not crazy, but
your middle's been moved.
it's been moved, and I'm more open to having conversations as prior than when I was that lefty David, because he wouldn't want to hear what people had to say.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, oh yeah, I'm curious. I'm honestly
Yeah.
curious.
What about you, Dev?
I wouldn't say anything political because, like, growing up, I've never been left or right. Like, I
Yeah.
just hung out with whoever I hung out with. If I didn't agree with you, like, I would be like, so what about this?
Yeah, that
You know what I
shit
mean?
doesn't
Yeah,
affect me
it's-
being friends with you.
Yeah,
you know?
so I don't ever
Yeah.
let politics. I've never, in my whole life, politics has never affected me. I would say more of understanding family, understanding, like, even when I was younger, I wanted to be around my dad, and that middle was like, I just want my dad in my life, and that's kind of got further, and I would say understanding, like, what my brother is going through and my mom goes through is kind of like brought me closer, because I've been in my own world for so long that I need to figure out the way I think of how hard life is going to be and where I want to end up. They might not want to end up there,
Right.
but that doesn't mean I don't help them get where they're going.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I need to figure out how to dial back into their lives or figure out what they want. And so that's what we did. We tapped into what are our parents as goals, our brothers,
Right.
like, so that's, I would say that's a big one, like moving closer to that middle and figuring out, like, taking it step by step, not trying to go from 0 or 100 to the 25-yard line in
Right.
one day. Like, you know what I mean? So that's something that I'm working on. I feel like I'm getting closer to that middle.
For
But
me,
yeah.
for me, a big one when I was really young, I grew up My dad doesn't like hugging. I never liked hugging. I thought it was just very weird that everyone had to hug each other all the time. Even when I see people all the time, they want to give me a hug. And I was like, I don't know. Like, why do my guy friends want to give me a hug? You know, like, it's just weird to me. Why does my uncle want to give me a hug? It's fucking weird. I always thought that. My dad's like, it's just as I've gotten older, everyone wants to hug all the time now. You know, even this camping trip, I was like, yeah. And before I was very rigid, I would not do it. I was just like, I'll shake your hand. My middle's been moved because I know it makes everyone else happy, and socially, it's just more normal. So if people want to hug, I'll hug you, bro. You know?
Yeah.
And my friends now, they're like, oh, what, you hug? Back home? And I was like, yeah, dude, fuck it. You want a jerky too? So I think that middle's been moved, you know?
Hugging duties.
So I think I've gotten more comfortable with that.
Nice.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's just it's always cool to hear like about like because you're always close with your friends, and it's crazy to hear how you talk about your friend group home, and back here it's like a totally different world.
Yeah, totally.
And so it's good that you got to live in two different worlds. You know what I mean? I'm pretty sure you've been a lot of places, but
moving on. Did you guys have anything else on zone of acceptance or region of rejection? I think we tackled that pretty well.
Mm-hmm. I'd agree. I have something on 102 and 103.
Okay.
If you want to jump into yours first.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, didn't really have anything. It would just be repetitive at this point.
Okay.
Okay, I agree.
I was just gonna like sort of define. Are you gonna? Is it within confirmation bias?
Before and after.
Before and after.
Yeah.
Okay. I like, so what I've been doing, the chapters, is I'm highlighting what I believe is a summary of the chapter.
Mm-hmm.
So when I go back and look at these chapters, I can see, like, I read it and, like, I know exactly what this chapter is talked about. So
Yeah.
for this chapter, I highlighted, but it turned out that how people perceive these seemingly objective scientific results depended entirely on their position on the field. People who supported the death penalty, he's talking about the death penalty and how people agree or disagree, thought the study suggesting it was an effective deterrent was more convincing. Death penalty opponents thought the exact opposite. So it's really
Right.
depending on where you stand in your life and your beliefs. It has nothing to do with
The facts.
the facts.
Yeah.
That's what I was gonna
Yeah.
say too.
Yeah.
So for the readers listening, think about that football field, one of the zone of acceptance and the region of rejection on the other end. The way people receive even scientific results, which are supposed to be objective, it really just depends on what position you are on that field. What Devin
Right.
just said.
I would say COVID-19 is a perfect example
Yeah.
of that.
Right.
Look
Perfect.
at any news thing.
Absolutely.
News comes out, Fox News says one thing, CBS says the other. Both people are talking about the same facts. Two different, completely games
It's a
are
perfect
playing. You know?
example. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people listen to arguments and like pick out little pieces
What they
that they
wanna
can
hear.
apply to their own
Yeah.
debate.
What's that called? Confirmation bias?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Definitely. And like, it's interesting because like literally you can bring somebody like a scientific objective article written based on these things and people be like, yeah, I took A, B, and C and they applied to my thought process completely.
The rest is fake news.
Yeah, the rest is fake news. Right. So on page 102 here, I have two things highlighted.
Okay.
They are on the top. So it says people's decisions to accept the findings or search for flaws depend less on the specific procedures employed and more on whether its results aligned with their existing beliefs.
Kind of what we just talked about.
Right.
Yeah.
Whether information seems true or false depends on one's position on the field. Rather than uniting opposing sides, exposure to evidence sometimes just widens the gap. Not only do people have to be willing to change, they have to be willing to listen to information that might open them up to the possibility.
Ooh,
And so-
that's probably one of my favorite quotes.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest ones in this chapter too, because it's, if you want to see change in somebody in your life, are they even really going to listen to what you have to say?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they'll hear you, but are they going to really listen? You know?
Isn't it crazy how listening is a very important and significant theme that keeps recurring in a lot of these books that we're reading? Well, I mean, this is only our
This is our fourth book.
fourth book, right? But listening is very important, actively listening.
Mm-hmm.
And how you get somewhere with the conversation, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think it's just funny. It's like a dad joke, whatever. But he's like, you got 2 ears and one mouth. means you're born to listen more than talk.
Mm-hmm. I heard that one.
Yeah.
That was a good one right there.
That was, I think it was a quote in the book too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And the I think it's 7 Habits.
Yeah, 2 eyes too. You're supposed to be more observant in general.
Yeah, it's such a dad thing. All right. Listen.
Did you guys read that?
mouth.
Hey, one thing I wanted to bring up on the last thing Jay just said, that you got to be open to listening to grow, or what exactly was the last quote?
So it says here, not only do people have to be willing to change, they have to be willing to listen to information that might open them up to the possibility.
Okay, so I thought of an example. I've been going to the gym consistently for like 4-5 years now, doing my own thing. Sometimes I work out with a buddy and I follow his regimen, but if I do my own thing, I got my own thing.
Right.
Recently, some friends of ours at the gym introduced us to this workout trainer called Dana Lynn Bailey, and they're like, you should check her out, blah, blah. The girls that we're talking to are amazing. They're really in good shape.
Fit as hell.
And typically, I think I would just like brush it off, like, I mean, that's cool and all for you guys,
Right.
but I'm doing my own thing,
Right.
you know? But I decided to give it a shot. Me and David did it, and I am very happy. I think it's great. I'm happy that new information was given to me, doing something I like to do. I learn new workouts all the time, and because I was open to listen to someone else's advice, I think I've been able to grow more in the gym.
Sick.
Yep.
What would you say? I mean, you said they're very fit, right?
Yeah.
What would you say, if that wasn't it, was the thing that established them as a credible source for information?
The fact that they were fit, and she had told me that she'd only been working out for 1.5 years, and she looks amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, if you can do that from nothing,
Right.
I already have a pretty good baseline. Like, the proof's in the pudding, bro.
Right.
You know?
Right. Definitely.
So that's a credible source.
I think kind of going off of this quote, it's like people have to be willing to listen, but you have to give them a reason to, right? And that's why I ask is like, well, what established them as a credible source, right?
Did you guys see the meme I sent you about the person who tells you eating eggs is bad, and the person who eats 12 eggs? And like, that's a credible source. The person who weighs 200 pounds telling you eggs are bad. Hey, bro, don't listen to them. The guy at the gym who looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger, he tells you to eat eggs, fucking eat eggs, dude. He knows what he's talking about.
Definitely.
That's a credible source.
So, like, let's say I know one thing that you wanted to do was help your brother, right? How are you establishing yourself as a credible source for him to listen to?
Lead by example for one.
Okay.
If I'm showing up late, because it's not going to be nothing big. It's not going to be nothing like, oh, I established my business and we're 6 figures. No, it's going to be something small, like something he can conquer. Like show up on time.
Right.
Be responsible. Like, for instance, we went to go take his driver's test. He forgot his permit. I got there at 8 o'clock in the morning, drove all the way to the Clovis location, forgot his permit.
Sheesh.
And so it's at some point, because I didn't say nothing to him in the car. I was like, okay, let's just come back tomorrow. Like,
That must have been so
I'm
frustrating.
not going to be. So you need to call. You need to make sure you call. You need it. No. If I call you, if I see you tomorrow when I go home and I ask you, have you rescheduled, and you haven't, that's showing me we're not making progress. So I need to go back to the drawing board. There's something that's not clicking in your head that he's not finding importance on being accountable for himself. Nobody else, just himself. So
Did he reschedule?
I don't know. I'm gonna talk to him tomorrow.
Dude, I would have handled that so much differently if that was my little brother.
Oh man.
And it's the fact that
I need to be patient.
I think about, like, well, since we read this chapter, now that I move through life, it's a step at a time.
Yeah.
It's like the next step might be a micro step.
I think you are making steps though, because you're recognizing, even if I go off right now on him, it might just backfire. It really just might
backfire,
we just talked about.
or nothing's gonna change.
Right.
Yeah, because you're seeing like, okay, there's a different way to handle this, and you just said there's something underlying that I need to look at.
Yeah.
These books have helped me. I'm excited to go
And
home.
so that's why, like, even talk to my mom, because my mom, I've identified this in myself, is when I talk to somebody that I believe needs to hear this, I talk like I'm talking at you rather than talking with you. And I
Right.
talk very directly, and I do it with my mom all the time. She's like, I feel as if you're talking to me like you're trying to preach to me or lecture me. And it's like, there needs to be a certain time where there needs to be action. We're in the process of action, not talking anymore.
Right.
And so I'm at that breaking
True.
point. So it's hard to just talk and trying to get you guys to understand.
Right.
Like, we're grown ass men.
Right.
There's no talking at this point anymore. Like, we need to show up and show up now.
Right.
And so I've identified it because multiple people have told me that. So that's one thing I'm trying to hone in, like, not talk at people. Just because I'm learning all this stuff and it could be really good
Yeah.
advice, I don't like talking at people. I want it to be a very collaborative conversation. But yeah, I see progress, but at the same time, I understand, like, my life's going to keep moving. If I got to drag you up by the fucking rope, I'll continue to do that, but it's not going to slow me down. I need to get far enough ahead to where I can keep pulling you.
Right.
And not, like, be dragged down with you, if that makes any sense.
Moving on to, I have some things I want to talk about on 105.
Okay.
So I think this is very interesting. And for readers listening, maybe you can draw some similarities too. Maybe you can think about defining these two people in your life. People, 105. So this is the find the movable middle section. We're trying to find people's movable middle. He points out on 105 that people who don't care about a given domain or issue have a wide zone of acceptance and a small region of rejection. So their football field, they got a wide zone of acceptance and hitting that interception. But for people who actually care a lot and are very overtly vocal about that, it's the exact opposite. They see things as right and wrong, meaning there is only a little tiny area where they would consider, and they have a larger area of a region of rejection. And I can notice that a lot. Some of the friends that hang out with us too, that are the quote unquote social justice warriors, if you try and talk to them, they care a lot, but they're very easy to just, well, their zone of acceptance is
Very
little small.
And the opposite of that would be someone that's very agreeable. The person that has a very large...
It wouldn't be
Who don't care.
They don't. Yeah.
They don't actually have a
Well, it wouldn't be...
they don't have a given domain. It says right here, people who don't care about a given domain or issue have a wider zone of acceptance and a small region of rejection.
I think about this perfect example when we went camping. Remember the whole wood situation, and we said, raise your hands if you care, you don't care. Raise your hands if you want to give the wood, you want to keep the wood, or you don't care. And I think a third of the people just said, I don't care. Either way is cool with me.
So
Jay
they
was
were-
one of those people.
yeah.
His rejection, there was no rejection or acceptance. He goes, doesn't really matter.
Indifferent.
Indifferent to me. So there's no words for me to say.
Right.
The people who did care were very vocal. About it, right.
I hear what you're saying. What I'm asking is agreeableness, being too agreeable, doesn't that lead you into not being able to care enough because you can't speak up? Because in a sense, if you're not speaking up, in a sense, you don't care enough to be like, nope, I'm taking a stand. For instance, we know people that are very agreeable. You can say something to them and they will not start a confrontation because they don't want to.
Right.
Isn't that somewhat of avoidance?
where
Is that,
where are you getting agreeable from?
That's the word I'm using. Because if what I'm hearing is changing minds becomes a lot harder. It's one thing. Or wait, I'm reading the wrong part.
A small zone except.
It's on 105, the bottom.
People who don't care about a given domain or issue have a wide zone of acceptance. That means their thing is huge, meaning they'll be like, yes, 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 yes. They'll
Right.
just say yes to everything.
I think he's just saying that it doesn't say well they'll just say yes. I think they have more of a capacity
Well, it could be
to
no.
listen maybe.
It could be they could reject everything because they don't care. No, 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 no. It could be yes, 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 or no, 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 no.
I think it kind of comes back to the idea of like, you have to stand for something or you fall for anything type of situation.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
So if they're too agreeable or too reject, if they just say no to everything, do they actually care? And they're actually that zone of acceptance. They're not accepting it, but they're allowing it to pass over them like they don't care.
So you would we're agreeing
Yeah,
should
we're-
stand for something.
Yeah. So my main question is agreeable fall into that zone of acceptance? Like, would they be that person, or would they be the person with the smaller zone of rejection or smaller zone of acceptance?
I think those might be two different things, because when I think of acceptance, not necessarily agreeable, I'm thinking of an example. Let's say I would say Jeremy is a very accepting guy with situations.
Mm-hmm.
Different situations occur, and it's not like Jeremy shuts down and I can't move forward from this point because it's not the way I wanted. He goes, oh, this has happened, I must do this now.
Okay.
And that's
Yeah.
how I think of acceptance, because his zone of rejection, for the most part, is pretty small. I very hardly see Jeremy be like, I'm not doing this.
Yeah.
And if he does, he's already carved that out for himself. But like through the camping trip, a lot of people depend on him to do stuff, and it's stuff that he didn't normally like calculate sign up for. But he's like, okay, yeah, I'll handle it. You know.
Yeah.
So
That's very true.
but he's not necessarily agreeable because if you ask him an opinion, he would give you his opinion.
Oh yeah, he goes off.
But
He'd be spitting.
But he is accepting to a situation because he knows we can only move forward, you know? And if he doesn't handle it, he's going to handle it.
Jeremy duties.
I kind of think too, it's if you're indifferent about a situation, so like let's talk about the wood thing. Like it was, I don't care what decision you guys make, just make it. You know, it's like I'll accept whichever of the alternatives I get, right? But if it's the strong belief, like somebody in our group was like, no, I feel like we should give this person this wood. It's just wood, you know?
Yeah.
Okay, let's switch top. I know, let's not go on a tangent.
Hold on.
And at the end of the day, too, I was like, okay, if you guys feel so strongly about it, it doesn't really affect me that much.
Right.
I just made a call.
But if let's take the case with the wood, right? If Lexi was like, let's just give him all the wood, right? Then my zone of acceptance, because I'm indifferent, would have been like, nah, hell nah, right? I'm cold, no, right?
Yeah.
But if she's like, okay, let's just give him a little bit of wood. Then I'm like, I don't really care.
That's the example because if you wanted to give him wood, I didn't care.
Right.
Okay, Lexi, that makes you happy. Give him the wood. You're going to buy more tomorrow.
Right.
You signed up for it. You take that responsibility. But if she would have said, I want to give him all the wood, I would have stood up and said, absolutely not.
Right.
Jeremy, put her in the truck.
So your zone of rejection is small, but it's not non-existent.
Yeah,
I would say.
Okay.
Moving on.
Okay.
Moving on.
So 107 on the bottom, it says, when dealing with issues that people feel strongly about, start by finding the movable middle. Individuals who, by virtue of their own existing positions, are more likely to shift because they're not so far to begin with. So I don't care where you lean. I just want to know if you guys have seen the Change My Mind with Steven Crowder.
I have not.
The guy takes a table like this. He's sitting where John's sitting, or one of these two. And what he says is like, okay, male privilege is a myth, right? People are going to feel real strong about that.
Oh, is it
right?
the guy that has the sign on the...
Right,
okay.
that guy, right?
Changing my mind.
I've seen it.
And so
The memes are funny as fuck.
when people sit down, what he tries to do first is find that middle ground, right?
Okay.
He's strong in the way he feels, and he is a great debater, so he tends to change a lot of minds.
Master debater.
But what he does is he sits down and he's
I'll
like,
show you
this
that
is what
soon.
I feel. What do you feel on the subject?
Yeah.
Okay, let's find common ground. You said this, I can agree with that. Boom, we find this middle ground. So how about what I bring up point A? What do you feel about point A? Do you think it's a little wrong? Do you think it's a little right? He might go about it in different ways with different people, but what his first thing to do is to find that middle common ground, he calls it. Let's find common ground and go based off of that. Where do we defer off of that?
To me, it reminded me a lot of Nice Bike. The whole point of Nice Bike is to find common ground so the opposing person can talk to you about themselves.
Right.
And that's the conversation, right?
Right.
People love talking about themselves. So you can find a middle ground. If you Nice Bike them, they start talking, then all of a sudden you can start relating back to them. I also have a bike. I love riding. I love camping.
Right.
But you know what? This whole thing, I think we could do it another way. And all of a sudden they go, well, this guy, he's not too bad. He likes going to the gym. He's a lot like me, you know?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I find people to be more attractive, not physically or like anything like weird like that, but just more attractive to me that show their teeth, the wolf that shows their teeth rather than the fox that hides behind the bush. You know what I mean? Like, I prefer people like that because you're showing your cards. You're not trying to hide anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So if I come to the table with my cards shown and I see that your cards are already shown, to me there's going to be a faster middle ground. Not saying we're going to be best friends or anything.
Right,
We don't have to be. But I know where you stand.
I'm the same way. I agree
You know
with
what
that.
I mean?
I love people like that.
I like people like that, and I'm not saying you have to remain in my life. You have to be a friend with me, but I like to have real conversations like that because there is a faster middle ground rather than being like, so what do you believe? So what are we trying to get to? Like, what do you really feel in your heart? And a lot of people kind of just
beat around the
and,
bush and
yeah,
shit.
and it's like just come out with it.
That reminds me of when you took me to that first party at what's her face's house? Your guys' neighbors now.
Maddie and Charles.
He took me over and we were drinking. And I was talking about religion and what I wanted to do and like my dreams I had, and I could tell people. I was putting all my cards on the table and they were like, "Whoa, that was a lot."
Yeah.
But
We're just trying to watch this music video and drink.
but that was boring to me. Let's talk about that. Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
Let's get down to the nitty gritty.
That was one
like
big
those
thing I used to tell David is I want to have a friend group that has like meaningful, like really meaningful conversations.
Right.
Like, even
At
if
least
it makes
like they're more than just 0.
yeah. now in my life, it has to exist for you to remain in my life.
Right.
Because my time is clicking. That's all I hear is like seconds just going by. And so if I'm spending time with you, that's because I find importance in you in my life. If I'm just going to hang out with my friends and you happen to be there, cool, I'm gonna hang out with you, but don't expect me to show up at every event, be out every night. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you were there, and the people that I hold of value were there too.
Yeah.
So if you really want to come into a circle of mine or get close to me, like, we just have to understand where we stand on stuff and be really, you have to reiterate to me what I believe, and I have to be able to do the same to you.
Right.
True.
If we can't do that,
Rogerian
then
method.
it's hard for me to kind of connect with you.
Right.
So,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, what are we doing if all we're doing is celebrating?
yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
Favorite
So-
quote of all time.
Definitely. So that's what I had on the. This is the
Find the movable middle.
moving the middle. That's all I really had on there.
I thought it was interesting. He talks about certain companies trying to find a new product to take off, rather than trying to convince everyone how great it is. Find the group that already needs it.
Right.
I identified with that in my life, a lot of that, and really couldn't identify it. Like when I did network marketing, when I was in sales, and even when I was in PacSun. You really have to have an eye for people that are looking for specific. It's the water in the walls. Specific, like you have to be able to pick up on what people actually need rather than like what they just want.
Right.
Like I like how he gives the examples, the vitamins compared to painkillers.
Right.
People need painkillers
Yeah.
compared to a regular healthy human being taking vitamins. You can miss your vitamins a whole week and be okay.
Right.
So that was very interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting too.
So the next subheading is ask for less. The first question I have on the first page, 109, I was kind of assuming that he was going to answer this, but at the very bottom it says how to get people to do something they'd rather not do, and I put a question instead of a period on that. Just to ask that question, because I'm pretty sure he answers it, but I asked myself that before I read it. Like, how do you get people to do something they'd rather not do?
This whole chapter, this subsection, it reminds me, my first ever job was working for this company called Weedman Lawn Care, and we were door-to-door salesmen. And our whole job was to go door-to-door cold and get people to buy our product. And the whole vitamins versus painkillers thing, if people weren't interested, I would just very quickly give them a spiel about I walked through their lawn, all bullshit. How I took some samples. I saw crabgrass. I saw this. I want to take it back. I want to do a forensic analysis on it. We're gonna make a product just for you. You don't have to buy anything. If I can just get your name and number, a professional will give you a call and go over the analysis with you. And they're like, well, it wouldn't hurt to hear about the analysis.
Yeah.
I'll give you my name and number. That's all I needed to do. I started with like, this is what you kind of need, but I'm not gonna sell anything right now. Can I just get the name and number? Because the whole part of my job was to get names and numbers. So
Yeah, it's interesting.
people don't want to fucking listen to a 15-year-old talk about their lawn. I don't know what I'm talking about.
Right. Definitely. This makes me think of I went on a hike recently with Nadine, and it was 104 degrees outside, and it was a 7-mile hike, 7.8 miles.
I'm surprised you did that with her.
Right?
That you got her.
So I got her there, right? And then it got to the point where we're hiking uphill and there's no shade, right? And so instead of being like, hey, let's make it to the end. Come on, let's just make it to the end. It was like, you see that shade over there? Can we make it over there?
Yeah.
Got to that shade and then was like, okay, you see that shade over there? Can we make it over there? So it was like breaking down this 7-mile hike into shade, right? It was like, let's get to that
Sick.
shade,
Smart.
sit. Let's get to that shade and sit. So for 7 miles, it was like walk 100
Nice.
meters, stop. Walk 100 meters, stop. But it was like to see her, because at first walking up that hill, she was like, "Oh, Jay, I don't think I'm gonna do it." And I was like, "Okay, what can I do at this moment to get you to that shade?" Okay, so I'm gonna douse you with water, and we're gonna get up to the next shade, and we're gonna eat and get you like situated, and then just get her just bite-sized chunks. Because literally what he says here is agreeing to a small related ask moved people in the right direction, which meant that the final task, which once would have been too far away, was now within the zone of
Yeah,
acceptance.
so what John was saying, that small, like,
Right.
John wasn't there to make the sell. He wasn't there to close the whole thing right then.
It was
and
just
there,
to move it a
to
little
get
bit.
Right.
just to move that
Just
that scale. A little
Get
bit.
you 100 meters that way.
By the time the guy gave him a call, they were already waiting for the call.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They're
Yeah.
like, okay, yeah.
Yeah, those bite-sized chunks.
I got the next quote that I feel like will go right after this. What we're talking about. Having a tough time changing someone's mind? Try asking for less rather than pushing for more. Dial down the size of the initial request so that it falls within the zone of acceptance. Not only will that make the initial request more successful, it'll also make big change more likely overall.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I think that would be the answer.
I think that it's applicable to even to our group. When we first started, we set out pretty minimal but solid guidelines.
Yeah.
We didn't ask for a lot, right?
Be on time.
Be on time. Let's all read the book. Make sure we all read the chapter.
Right.
And we meet up. We talked about it.
Right.
And then from there, we ended up getting more. You know.
Mm-hmm.
But
True.
it's like we didn't ask for a lot.
Yeah, and even this podcast, like baby steps into the podcast. Like the
Right.
first
Totally.
day of getting this stuff, we set up immediately. Like, how do we use this stuff?
Totally.
Right.
You know what I mean? We didn't set up the camera and go straight to posting. We're like, okay, let's figure out how to use it and what we're doing. And what
Bite-sized
we're going to talk
chunks.
about.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean?
Totally.
So this is going to be an interesting like journey to watch back on to see how far we can go and really like
Facts.
this is going to be really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it. No, you go.
I was gonna say on page 112,
Mm-hmm.
the bottom, more so on asking for less. It says asking for less is about committing to the process. A slow and steady shift with many stages along the way.
Mm-hmm.
That is a process. We're gonna cut that one. I highlighted that for a reason, but
No,
you
it's good
need
though.
more.
The bro said, "I'm gonna get deep with this, right?"
There's a sentence before it. Literally says, "Look at big changes, and they're rarely very abrupt." Right. So it's true. Like you don't see somebody getting up one day from the couch drinking milkshakes like David Goggins.
I was gonna
and
say
run.
David Goggins, but he's a fucking mythical
The
creature.
dude's a goddamn mythical creature,
yeah,
man.
he's like a phoenix. Dies and goes back to life.
Unless you hit the
Amen.
lottery,
Staples Hills.
fucking hit $100 million jackpot, and then your life
Right.
changes overnight. But
And you're still the same person now.
yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
You definitely are.
But yeah, it's very true. The changes aren't very abrupt. I even look at myself from 18 to now. It's like, it's slow, steady grind to becoming better. And it all started maybe with like picking up Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yeah.
You know, literally like reanalyzing my thoughts because I was taught so many different things.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I would say the past 5 years, because I can't remember when I was young and what I was thinking about or what I wanted to do, but the past 5 years, I think the biggest milestone in my growth and my mindset and how I see everything is focus on the next step you can do that's manageable
Right.
and that doesn't overburden you. Don't
Right.
try and do what other people are doing or try to compete and look for, oh, they're doing this, I need to be doing that. Like, what's my next best step?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? What's my next small step that's going to move me forward and get me going into the bigger step?
Yeah, I think that's a good point
Sheesh.
because a lot of this book is how to change anyone's mind. I think the way to look at this book is how to change my mind.
That's what I keep thinking to myself too. I think this chapter, though, who was I talking this about? Maybe it was one of you guys.
Jenny, you guys.
I think it's
It
about-
was me. Yeah, we were talking about the title.
I don't like the title. It just sounds like I'm trying to control somebody,
Manipulate
manipulate people to do what I want. The more I read it, it's really how can you change your mind? How can you be more accepting? And how can you negotiate better with your peers or relationships?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So-
I think. Oh, go ahead, Jay.
It was a question, so if you have something you want to
Yeah, I
say.
think to sway people from thinking like that, I think that's why he threw in the butterfly and the yellow, like colorful, like. Because imagine if it said this, just a catalyst and how
Black
to
and
change,
red.
and it was just black and red.
Well, see-
super bland.
I think the opposite. I think people will pick this up because they go, "Oh, perfect! I need a book like this. I would love to be able to influence my
Enticing.
surroundings."
Yeah,
you know.
I see
And then
that
they read
too.
it and they start learning about themselves.
Like, I didn't want this. I want to control people.
So on page 113, it says, rather than just asking for less then, it's really about chunking the change. Breaking bigger ass into smaller, more manageable chunks.
Bigger ass.
You said
Ass, all that ass.
Break that ass down.
So I wanted to ask you guys, if you're looking at yourself and you want to make a big change, what is it and what small things are you changing now to accomplish the big change?
Just stay responsible. You know what I mean? To the best of my ability. Like, I know the 3 things that I'm focused on. What am I doing every day to do? Like, am I showing up on time? If I'm forgetting stuff, why am I forgetting that? You know what I mean? If I have to go pick up, it's personal, business, everything. Because you have to be able to balance all that stuff. And I feel like I'm barely getting a jumping start now. You know what I mean? I'm finally like, but something like picking up prints, like, don't forget it. Put it in your calendar. Your responsibility now. Someone told you to do it. Now it's your responsibility. No one's gonna be like, "Hey, Devin, you need me?" Don't forget. Don't forget. Because what if you live alone and you're 32? Who's gonna be there to remind you to do everything in your life?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had to talk with my little brother all the time.
So I think that's mine.
So what was the big change? You just being responsible?
Wait, big change.
So it says here that the quote is, rather than just asking for less, then it's really about chunking the change, breaking big asks into smaller, more manageable chunks. So what is the big ask you're asking of yourself in life, and what manageable chunk are you working on currently?
I would say, obviously, this podcast, financial freedom. I would say I can identify 2. Those are the bigs.
Okay.
I can identify the 2 small steps or smaller steps that podcast. Just stay consistent with you guys. Stay consistent on the uploads. Stay consistent on the content. And then financial freedom, just stay working on the business. Stay around Doug and Mark. Make sure that you're learning trading every single week. You know what I mean? If it's 1 day a week, just continue doing it every single. And so that's eventually going to get me to that point I need to be at. Okay. I don't know what it looks like. I don't know. I just know I have somewhere that I want to reach. And David taught me this too. Don't ever set an end goal. Like, I can't remember what we were talking about. David said,
the journey is the destination.
We're looking for this. Oh, if I had this, then my life is going to be like this.
Oh yeah.
If I had $100,000, then my life will eventually be better. Or if I want to live healthier, then if I'm going to live healthier, then I'll be like this. Rather than right here, right now. Do you feel healthy? If not, what do you need to change right now? Rather than being like, the future exists and it's real, and I'm setting that out there to just be there. Rather than just move now. If you're not healthy now, if you're telling yourself you're not healthy, but you want to be healthy, then act now.
Yeah.
Sort of like removing the barriers. You know, what's stopping you from doing this right now?
Mr. Monotone.
Yeah.
How about you guys?
Real sad boy hours.
It's like removing the barriers.
What are the big asks you're asking of yourself, and what manageable chunk are you addressing currently?
Fuck, man. I have so much shit I want to do. Like, even just thinking about, I want to be an artist. I want to be a creative director. I want to produce music. I want to have this podcast blow up. I want to do a bunch of shit. I think a problem for me is I need to know how to break down my time in little things into chunks. But what helps me is to break down my life into sections of my life. Maybe this next couple years is me on my grind to creative director. Once I'm in a creative director position, what do I have more of an ability to do now? Maybe it's more funding that can help me fund my artist studio, where I can only do art, or only make music, or just breaking things down like that. It helps me, and that breaks down into even smaller ones. So for right now, for this position that I'm in currently today, I'm on my road to being a creative director. So that's how I kind of break it down, I'd say.
Okay.
Daily things, small things. I break it down to what can I do right now? That's, you know, like how we were talking about the quadrants and stuff like that from our first book, 7 Habits. Knowing your urgencies, knowing your priorities, knowing what's important.
Definitely. Okay.
On that, don't be scared to ask your company. The position came up, you know?
All right.
The worst thing they can say is no.
Right.
The best thing they can say is yes. And the middle would be maybe not right now, but that we recognize that you're hungry for it.
Right.
A new position will come up and we'll be thinking about you.
Oh, yeah.
But if you don't ask,
True.
you will not stick out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might stick out, but that's not it. But, you know, you stick out more.
That's not the point. The point is to get the fuck. No.
How about you, John?
For me, my 2 big things. One, especially watching you guys all, you 2 in your relationships and Dev with your family, I'm envious of how patient you guys are. It's such a strong suit, you guys. So I would like to be more patient. Working on that little chunks is, I think Ace has helped me more with that because you can't communicate with the dog. You gotta be patient with them. So, I love him, you know, so I'm pretty patient with Ace. I think that's helped me. And I've been watching myself hold my tongue more than I ever have when I think people are like testing my patience. So that's just something that I got to work out and become stronger at. The second thing is I have a financial goal that I have always dreamed of, and I would like to have $1 million in the bank. And I have a smaller goal than that, which I'm working towards right now, and I already reached one chunk of my smaller goal. So
Nice.
would like to keep compounding that and do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, bravo.
You know what they say, man? God, you ask God for patience, oh, he'll give you something to figure out some patience. Promise you that.
Yeah.
But those are good. Those are good. Good stuff. All right, moving on.
Moving on.
Switching the field, find.
Wait, Jay, what about you? Did you say something?
Oh, did you? What's
I
your
did
big
not.
challenge?
True.
It's a tough one, but you know, I can go with the generic of like trying to become a scientist from a student.
That's what it is. That's what it is, man.
Yeah, currently that's what it is. So switching gears from like, okay, I was allotted that I have to do this by this deadline, kind of jumping into establishing my own deadlines and establishing my own desire to like jump into a certain subject of geology, which is, it's kind of hard to pinpoint and pin down, but it's a tall task that I'm breaking down in chunks. So like meeting with Aurora weekly to discuss scientific articles we're reading, or meeting with Aurora weekly to look through the microscope and get accustomed to what they look like in thin section.
She's got such a cool name, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Definitely.
Sounds like
So
it.
I'm just making quadrant 2 steps in that direction where it's like I right now I'm not required to go to school. I'm not required to read these things. But right now, if I want to set myself apart and become more than just like push the buttons to get a degree, to actually become a scientist, I have to jump into this because it's something I desire and truly want to do.
Yeah.
And so jumping into that, knowing that, okay, it's not required. This is something I want to do.
And
So-
your peers and the other professors and teachers will recognize that, you know?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
I remember in Weldon school, we had a time where we started and where we ended. And I would show up 2 hours early to practice, and I'd
Right.
stay like an hour or two later because I wanted to be good.
Right.
You know,
Definitely.
and they all recognize that.
Definitely. And they respect it and award it. you
Yeah.
know? So it's not that I'm looking for the awards. I really want to establish myself in my field.
It's the competition. I feel like for you, it's a competition thing. I feel like you like competition a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's why I'm choosing Waka as my professor, is because he looks at everything as like, how can I break the record?
Yeah, I love that. For me, that's what pushes me. I love being people who I can compete against.
Right.
Just because it makes it fun for me.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And that's what's really interesting about Waka, is like he looks at the whole thing as a sport and a game,
Yeah.
and he wants somebody to play with.
Isn't that so much fun? That's like
Right.
really so fun for me. You know, that's
Right.
how I think about a lot of things.
Definitely. All right, moving on. So we're at switching the field, find an unsticking point.
Okay.
I do feel like this chapter was a lot of story.
Yeah.
There was like here and there, but I don't like just highlighting quotes that I like.
Mhm.
I like to find like a discussion.
Can
like-
someone define an unsticking point?
Common ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought it was like a what's like the topic of discussion?
In this store right here,
Yeah, so the unsticking point would be the topic they're trying to unstick.
I
don't
think it's when he opens up about his wife and love life and etc. And then she goes to him saying, "Oh, so you do feel that humans
Yeah.
deserve to love somebody?" He goes, "Oh, yes."
Right.
And then he's more open to saying, "Well, maybe you deserve to love whoever you want to too, because it made me feel type of way." And then the unsticking point would be,
It's a
Yeah.
dimension where people are closely, where they feel that they are closer together, whether they agree rather than disagree.
okay,
That's what it is. When they agree, I put agree and then the alligator sign bigger than a disagree.
Yeah, because what you just said, John, that's where I have literally like the unsticking point.
Oh.
That's like exactly where I mark, because I think it's not. So what did you say, Jay? What it was?
Common ground.
So yeah, I guess I guess we'd be arguing the same.
Yeah, common ground.
Answer.
You pivot
Yeah.
and you go, okay, from there, can we do this?
Right, and I think that's where you get the most change, right? Because like on page 121, it says, rather than starting with the contentious issue or the field on which people are far apart, it finds a dimension where people are closer together, where they agree rather than disagree, an unsticking point. And so if like we're on two separate sides of the issue, let's just take the trans thing that they talked about in the chapter. If I can get you to understand that love is love, right, and that you get to love, why can I not get to love? What first needs to be established is that you agree with me that everybody should be able to love somebody.
Yeah.
That's the unsticking point.
That's the unsticking point. You agree with me there? Okay. Boom, we got that settled out. I love this person similar to the way you love your disabled wife,
Yeah.
right? So I should have that right to love this person however I please. If you know.
I thought it was on 119. I thought it was pretty interesting when he talks about putting yourself in someone else's shoes. He talks. I saw it as like a behind the scenes when people use that quote. The sentence below that says, "This works well when people can easily imagine what that other perspective is like." Meaning, if you can, he gives an example. If a straight A student has to help someone that's considered a degenerate or someone that's not does well in school and they're very uneducated, they're not going to be able to step into that person's shoes because they've gotten straight A's their whole life.
Right.
So how can, and so that's, I've never looked at using that quote in that or thinking about that quote in that fashion. Like when you're stepping into someone else's shoes, it's not just, you can't just be like, oh, I know how you feel because I hear you and now I feel you.
Right.
You actually have to somewhat go through
Something.
and he gives examples. You don't have to go through exactly what that person's gone through, but for the example of the straight A student, was that person struggling in sports?
Yeah.
Compare your experience to struggling in sports to the kid that doesn't know how to add his math, do math in class. So I think that was I think that's a skill. That's not something that you learn in school. I think that's something you have to teach yourself all the time.
Empathy.
Yep.
Empathy. Yep. There you go.
I think just kind of coming back real quick, I just wanted to say, when did people stop being taught that life wasn't fair? Right? So just kind of like on the idea that, things aren't fair. I get it that we want change, but kind of looking at that adversity and taking it as a challenge instead of like, I just can't do anything for it now.
I would say, just looking back in history, our parents were either raised by the kids of their grandparents were in the Great Depression.
Right.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at. So they were in the firm belief that life wasn't fair because they lived through it, right? We were born through a time of prosperity for the most part. The economy was good. We were post World War II, so there's no more big wars, right? So life's been good.
Right.
And when life's really peaceful, things get more social, right? Because everyone's winning. And if you're not winning, let's get you to win because everyone else is.
Right.
So I think we've just been in general prosperity for a long time.
Yeah, for a very long time. You can just think about what we have at ease of access. Just water, food, electricity, like that's the bare minimum. Now you're including Netflix. You can watch anything from anywhere at any time on mobile devices, anywhere at any time. You can contact anybody at any time. Like we can access everything at this point.
Yeah.
And to think as a child, like imagine what we had now. Our parents being able to go to the store and buy us a cell phone at the age of 11, and we have all the access that adults that are 32 have.
Right.
Yeah.
That shit's crazy to me. Like,
That shit is crazy.
so the fairness thing, I think we just live in a world that's very easy. We live in prosperity. Like there hasn't been, we're the only group of people, millennials, Gen Z, are the only group of people to live at least 50 to 20 years with no real except 08 depression, but that was recovered in what, 2 years?
It was like probably
was like,
5 plus 10, almost 10 years, but still though, it was no Great Depression.
It wasn't no fucking war. It wasn't a Great Depression. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like so.
It did get rough for a while, but people recovered.
And so but none of us went through that. Our parents.
Yeah,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? So like us kids are
We were
now
still in
adults.
school.
We were still in school, so we didn't even. And so now, 10 years from that point,
Yeah.
20 years from now, we have not seen anything bad go wrong in a while.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we have like things pop up here and there in the news, or like things across country, and like bad things happen. But
Pandemic.
yeah, the
Mhm.
pandemic, like, but
Even that really wasn't.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
money.
I kind of made that point just to kind of be like, there's people that look at things that are unfair and succumb to them, and then there's people that see them as unfair and become inspired.
like challenge.
Yeah, and so I think we need a little bit more of those people that see things as unfair and see it as a challenge versus like succumbing to it.
Yeah,
I see today in society that people that you just acknowledged get repressed more often than not in school while they're growing
Right.
because
Yeah.
they seem,
See that?
I don't know, combative. So they try to suppress them, put them on ADD.
And conformity is the whole thing about public school.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
I think that's a big problem too.
Definitely.
Yeah,
I used to get in trouble a lot in school
Yeah.
I think
for no reason.
understanding what fairness is, it's not outcome, it's opportunity.
Mm,
Like we all have the same opportunity. You just because
that's a great
you
point.
you played the same amount of time at basketball, went to the same school as LeBron James, had the same shoes. There was something he was doing, something you weren't, something you were doing, he wasn't, that got him on the path, and you weren't. Even if it was just a connection.
I think
You
J.
missed
Cole
the
talks
connection.
about that when he was thinking about, he just graduated college and he was trying to rap and he thought he could kind of make it because he had connections, but his friend pulled him aside and it clicked in his head because he thought he'd be able to make it in basketball and he didn't. But he goes, if I was a real athlete, I'd be training like a real athlete.
Right,
He's
right.
like, and I already messed up that, not doing that with basketball. Why am I not training like a real athlete to be a rapper?
Mm.
And once he started doing that, training,
Yeah.
that's when things started, because he's putting in time.
And I think
Definitely.
that's a hard pill to swallow. Like for even myself, like to recognize, hey, I want these stuff. I want all this stuff, everything that I think about, dream about, wish for. But am I putting the same effort that someone here before me put in before I was even here?
Yeah.
And got to where they're 60, 70 and sitting like lavishly.
Mm-hmm.
Am I putting in that same amount of work? But I don't like comparing myself. I don't like looking at someone's image and being like, I want to be that, and so I need to find out. I'm just going through my life and figuring out what's the best next step, and setting that goal, throwing it out there, and just letting it sit until I get to that point. I don't know when I'm gonna get there. I know I'm gonna get there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely. All right. Cool if I summarize it, wrap it up.
Send it.
yeah.
All right. So on page 123, it says to catalyze change, we need to start by finding the movable middle, asking for less, and switching the field to find an unsticking point. That was chapter 3, Distance in the Catalyst, How to Change Anyone's Mind by Jonah Berger. Paradyme signing off. We love you, man. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Paradyme. We just discussed chapter 3 from the book The Catalyst by Jonah Berger. The title of the chapter was Distance. Make sure you subscribe to the channel, leave us a like, drop a comment below because we love hearing back from you guys. And make sure you follow us on all our social media platforms. All the information will be in the description below. And remember, now equals tomorrow. Peace.